June 14, 1967. Pleiku Province, Central Highlands of South Vietnam. The rain has not stopped for 3 days. It slides off elephant grass and seeps into canvas packs, darkening the fabric until everything weighs more than it should. At 04:30, the jungle is still black, the air thick enough to taste. A 6-man Green Beret patrol waits in a shallow tree line. Depression knees sunk into mud rifles, angled down to keep water out of the actions. Captain Robert Hastings checks his watch by feel not sight. The luminous dial would be too bright. He has just returned from a briefing in Saigon weeks earlier, where British advisors spoke quietly about how the SAS moved through Malaya and Borneo. No wasted motion, no excess weight. Silence as doctrine, not technique. Tonight, Hastings is supposed to prove it can be done here. Each man carries more than 60 pounds. PRC-25 radio, extra batteries sealed in rubber, claymores, sea rations wrapped in plastic, 2 full canteens because dehydration kills faster than bullets in the highlands. The jungle presses against them, branches clawing web gear, vines snagging bayonets no one expects to use, but no one is allowed to leave behind. Staff Sergeant Mike Callahan feels the strap biting into his collarbone. He shifts slightly and freezes. Metal clicks softly against metal. He closes his eyes, counting to 5. Somewhere ahead, a cicada stops. The plan was simple on paper. Move at first light, slip past a known NVA transit route, observe, report, withdraw without contact. SAS patrols did this for weeks at a time, the British said. Minimal signature. Ghosts. What the briefing slides did not show was this terrain. Triple canopy jungle, red clay that sucks at boots, leeches already crawling under sleeves. In Borneo, the SAS stripped everything down. Hammocks, rice water, a rifle. Here, doctrine demanded readiness for everything. Firefight, casualty evacuation, radio contact at all times. The difference is already whispering its warning. At 0500, Hastings signals forward. 2 fingers, slow. The point man, Specialist Ray Denson, eases ahead. His boots are soaked, every step a gamble. He places his foot, then rolls weight carefully. The jungle does not care. A branch snaps anyway. No gunfire follows. Just the sound itself echoing too loudly in their heads. Callahan remembers the British major's words. You do not move quietly. You move correctly. Silence comes from habit, not effort. The patrol advances another 20 meters in 20 minutes. Sweat runs into eyes. Mosquitoes whine their ears. The radio antenna brushes leaves overhead, bending them out of shape, leaving a visible trail to anyone who knows where to look. At 612, the rain stops. That is worse. The sudden quiet feels exposed, like standing under a spotlight. Birds resume calling, then abruptly stop again. Hastings raises a clenched fist. Everyone drops. They hear it now. Footsteps, not careless, not rushed. A file moving with purpose. North Vietnamese army. Close. The Green Berets press into the mud, trying to become smaller than their equipment allows. Claymore detonators dig into ribs. A radio battery shifts, threatening another click. Callahan wraps his hand around the PRC handset, holding it still with pressure. Through leaves, he sees movement. Dark shapes. Pith helmets wrapped in cloth. Rifles carried low. The enemy patrol flows through the jungle with an economy the Americans can only watch. They are lighter. Fewer men. No radios. No extra ammunition hanging from every strap. They pass within 15 meters. Hastings holds his breath until his chest burns. This is the moment the SAS stories are built on. Let them pass. Leave no trace. Be gone before anyone knows you are here. But as the last NVA soldier steps by his heel, catches a loose vine. It pulls free with a wet tearing sound. The vine snaps back, slapping against Callahan's rucksack. The jungle exhales. A head turns. Then another. No one fires yet. Seconds stretch. Hastings knows what is coming. Weight shifts. A safety clicks off. Somewhere a man smells something wrong, hears something that does not belong. This is where theory meets reality. The British taught stealth as a culture. The Americans learned it as a method. Hastings raises his hand, preparing to signal withdrawal, knowing even that movement may be too late. The men tense muscles coiled under soaked uniforms. Fingers settle onto triggers. In the space between heartbeats, the mission unravels, not because anyone failed to try, but because silence borrowed without its foundation never truly holds. The first shot cracks from the jungle to the east, not from the Green Berets, but from the North Vietnamese patrol reacting on instinct. It is a probing round fired low meant to force movement. Leaves explode. Dirt sprays. The silence that Hastings tried to protect shatters completely. Callahan rolls to his side, rifle up sight picture swimming with rain and adrenaline. He does not fire. Not yet. Training fights with impulse. SAS doctrine would be to disappear. U.S. Special Forces doctrine says something else entirely. Maintain comms. Maintain control. Be ready to escalate. A second shot snaps past, close enough to hear it tear air. Hastings has his answer. He squeezes the handset and whispers, coordinates voice, tight controlled. The radio hums faintly. Too loud, always too loud. The NVA patrol reacts instantly. They fan out, not running, not panicking. They know this jungle. They know what 60 pounds of gear sounds like when it moves. They fire again, not to kill, but to fix. Callahan fires once deliberate. The recoil feels heavier than usual. Muzzle flash lights the undergrowth for a fraction of a second. That single shot commits them all. Within seconds, the firefight becomes asymmetrical. The Green Berets have firepower, M16s on semi-auto, claymores ready. The NVA have position and patience. They melt between trees, firing from angles that never seem to stay the same. Hastings signals withdrawal, west. Hands move fast now. Stealth is gone. Speed replaces it. The men rise, boots ripping free from mud with wet sucking sounds. They move uphill, breathing hard packs, shifting violently. This is where the difference becomes brutal. Every step costs energy. Every pause risks encirclement. Callahan feels the radio drag him backward and the antenna snagging branches. He rips it free, leaving broken leaves behind. A visible path. A breadcrumb trail of failure. In Borneo, the SAS would have dropped excess gear days ago. Here, doctrine forbids it. The radio stays. The batteries stay. Everything stays because extraction depends on it. A burst of automatic fire slams into a tree beside Denson. Bark explodes. He stumbles, but stays upright. No one stops to check him. Not yet. They reach a shallow ravine and drop. Hastings throws a claymore back along their route, fingers shaking as he sets the arc by memory. He waits, counts, then detonates. The explosion is deafening. Earth jumps, leaves rain down, the jungle screams. For a moment, the pursuit pauses. Breathing hard, Callahan presses his face into the mud chest, heaving. This was never how the SAS described it. Their stories were about control, about choosing contact or avoiding it entirely. Here, control evaporates the moment doctrine collides with environment. The radio crackles. Higher command wants a sit rep. Hastings answers in clipped phrases, knowing every transmission is a beacon. Minutes pass. Then, movement again. The NVA are not reckless. They probe test weight. They know Americans will not abandon wounded, will not abandon radios, will not vanish into nothing. Callahan realizes the truth before anyone says it. The problem is not that the Green Berets lack courage or skill. It is that they are carrying an entire system on their backs. Command communication of firepower. Extraction planning. The SAS carried only themselves. When contact resumes, it is closer, more aggressive. Grenades arc in thudding into mud. One detonates concussive and close. Denson goes down hard, bleeding from his leg. Now stealth is impossible. Now doctrine takes over, fully. Hastings calls for air. The radio screams into life. Coordinates are shouted. The jungle listens. As gunships thunder closer, drowning out everything else, Callahan understands the lesson forming in real time. You cannot borrow silence while bringing thunder with you. You cannot imitate the surface of a tactic without adopting the discipline that shaped it. The extraction will succeed. It always does eventually. But the illusion is gone. They did not fail because they were not elite. They failed because elite is a system, not a trick. The extraction comes hard and loud. UH-1 Hueys slash down through cloud and rotor, wash flattening grass and branches, turning the clearing into chaos. Door gunners rake the tree line as the wounded are dragged aboard. Callahan is last in hands, slipping on Denson's blood, the radio banging against his hip like an accusation. Minutes later, the jungle is gone beneath them, swallowed by mist and distance. The silence they tried to borrow never follows. 2 days later, in a windowless room in Saigon, the rain sounds different against concrete. It echoes. Captain Hastings stands over a scarred wooden table littered with maps and damp notebooks. A British liaison officer sits opposite him, quiet, attentive, not judgmental. The after-action report is blunt. Contact made earlier than expected. Stealth compromised. Heavy gear cited as a factor. Enemy discipline noted. What the report does not capture is the feeling of inevitability that set in the moment the jungle heard them. Callahan sits on a bench outside, boots off socks, drying on a pipe. His leg shakes without him noticing. He replays every movement, every sound, every moment where effort replaced instinct. He remembers the British major saying, "Stealth is not quietness. It is absence." Inside, Hastings finally says it. Not defensively, not angrily. We tried to do it their way. The British officer nods once. He does not smile. He does not lecture. You tried to do the end result, he says, not the process. He explains it without drama. SAS patrols are built from selection onward to operate cut off. No radio dependence, no expectation of rescue, no doctrine demanding escalation. Their stealth is a byproduct of that isolation. They move differently because they think differently. Hastings listens jaw tight. U.S. Special Forces are trained to integrate, to call artillery, to coordinate air, to bring the full weight of the system forward. It saves lives, it wins battles, it also makes ghosts impossible. The liaison officer gestures to the map. In Vietnam, silence is temporary. Contact is assumed. The jungle belongs to those who live inside it. Later that night, Callahan writes in a notebook he will never show anyone. He admits something that feels almost disloyal. The SAS stories made stealth sound like a skill you could practice, like shooting or navigation. But watching the NVA move that morning, he saw something closer to faith. They trusted invisibility because they had nothing else to fall back on. He thinks about the radio, how it anchored him to command, how it also anchored him in place. Weeks later, Hastings briefs another team. He does not repeat the SAS slides. He talks about limits, about respecting differences, about understanding that copying form without copying foundation leads to contact you cannot control. The lesson spreads quietly, not officially, not in manuals, in conversations between men who were there. Vietnam does not reward imitation, it punishes assumptions. The Green Berets adapt, they refine their own methods. Smaller patrols, different movement, but they never fully become ghosts because they are not meant to be. And that is the point. Elite units are not interchangeable tools. They are ecosystems. Remove one part and the rest collapses. In 1967, in the wet highlands north of Pleiku, that truth announced itself with snapped vines and breaking silence. The rain returns the following week as if the jungle itself refuses to let the lesson fade. Callahan is back in the field this time with a different patrol composition. Fewer men. Still heavy, but selectively so. The radio stays because it must. The claymores are reduced. Ammunition loads are debated instead of assumed. None of this is written policy. It is adaptation born from embarrassment and survival. They move slower now, but with intention. Not trying to be invisible, but trying to be unreadable. Hastings walks point for the first hour, wanting to feel the terrain himself. Every step reminds him how doctrine presses down as much as equipment. He can feel the urge to check time, to report position, to confirm plans. Each instinct pulls him away from the moment. The SAS had the luxury of silence because silence was their mission. For Green Berets, silence is often just the opening phase before violence. They stop at midday under thick canopy. Callahan counts leeches on his boots, flicking them off with practiced disgust. No one speaks, not because silence is sacred, but because sound is costly. They do not try to pass near known routes anymore. They accept that avoidance is temporary. Instead, they focus on reading signs. Bent grass, broken stems, fresh footprints softened by rain, but not erased. They are learning the jungle rather than trying to slip through it unchanged. Late afternoon brings distant movement. This time, they do not freeze hoping to be ghosts. They reposition deliberately using terrain, using patience, using the knowledge that contact is possible and manageable if chosen. Callahan realizes something unsettling. Trying to copy the SAS made them fragile. Accepting who they are makes them resilient. Back at base, Hastings writes another report. It will never be famous. It will never be quoted. It says simply that stealth without structural independence is performance, not capability. He knows the Green Berets will continue to study other units. They should. Learning matters. But copying is different from understanding. The British did not move quietly because it was impressive. They moved quietly because they could not afford not to. The Americans carry the weight of a nation behind them. That weight makes noise. Years later, men will tell the story wrong. They will say the Green Berets failed because they were careless, or because they were outmatched, or because the jungle was impossible. The truth is less dramatic and more important. They failed because elite methods are not modular. You cannot plug one into another and expect function. Discipline is not technique. It is architecture. In 1967, that architecture revealed itself the hard way, one snapped vine at a time. The patrol survives the week without contact, but that absence does not feel like victory. It feels conditional, temporary, like borrowed time that can be reclaimed without warning. Back at camp, Callahan finally speaks the thought that has been sitting in his chest since Pleiku. He does not say it in formation or in a briefing. He says it at night under a sagging canvas roof with rain tapping softly overhead and cigarette smoke hanging low. We keep trying to be quiet like them, he says, staring at his boots. But we are loud, even when we whisper. No one argues. Another sergeant and older with 2 tours already behind him nods slowly. He says something that shifts the room. The SAS disappears because no one is coming if they fail. We fight knowing someone always is. That sentence lands harder than any official critique. In the weeks that follow, the realization spreads through informal channels, in hooches, on perimeter watch, in the quiet moments between missions. The men begin to understand that what they admired in the SAS was not just stealth, but acceptance of isolation. A willingness to operate without backup, without reassurance, without constant contact. That is not how U.S. Special Forces are designed. Green Berets are connectors. They link air to ground, command to chaos, technology to terrain. Their strength is not silence. It is integration. When they pretend otherwise, they lose both. Hastings takes this insight to a planning session with higher command. He chooses his words carefully. He does not criticize allies. He does not question doctrine openly. He frames it as alignment. We should stop pretending stealth is our primary identity, he says. It is a phase, not a philosophy. Some officers bristle, others listen. Vietnam has a way of enforcing lessons regardless of approval. Patrols that attempt deep stealth without shedding doctrinal weight keep getting compromised. Patrols that plan for contact survive longer even when they avoid it. Callahan is later asked to brief a new team rotating in. He does not tell war stories. He tells them about sound, about how gear wants to move, about how radios shape behavior even when silent, about how pretending to be something else gets men killed. He says one line that sticks. If you want to move like ghosts, you have to live like you are already dead to command. No one laughs. The Green Berets do not abandon stealth. They redefine it. Stealth becomes preparation for contact, not a substitute for it. Movement is about positioning, not vanishing. Silence is tactical, not spiritual. The jungle notices the difference, in small ways at first, later in larger ones. The lesson that began with a snapped vine now reshapes how missions are conceived. Not copied, not borrowed. Built from what they actually are. By late 1967, the word mimic quietly disappears from the vocabulary. It is not banned, it is simply understood to be dangerous. Hastings watches a new patrol step off into the Central Highlands months after Pleiku. Different faces. Same jungle. The men move with purpose, not illusion. They know contact is possible. They plan routes with exit logic built in. The radio is treated as a tool, not a lifeline. Silence is used deliberately, not worshipped. The jungle still hears them. It always will. But now, being heard is not the end of the mission. Callahan never forgets that first patrol. Years later, when asked what went wrong, he does not talk about weight or terrain or British advice. He talks about assumptions. We thought elite meant universal, he says. It does not. The SAS never failed them. The lesson was never about tactics. It was about inheritance. Elite units are shaped by history, by doctrine, by political expectations, by what happens when things go wrong. You cannot import outcomes without importing risk tolerance. The SAS accepts isolation as default. The Green Berets are built around connection. Both are elite. Neither can replace the other. Vietnam forced that understanding into clarity. Some tactics can be studied. Some skills can be trained. But discipline is cultural. It is grown over years. It lives in what a unit expects to survive without. In 1967, in the wet, unforgiving highlands of South Vietnam, the Green Berets learned that silence is not a trick you perform. It is a consequence of how you live, how you plan, and how much you are willing to lose if no one comes. They did not fail because they lacked courage. They failed because elite foundations cannot be borrowed.